I don't have to tell you what the market is. I don't have to have other resources to prove to you what the market is. I can only tell you that my credibility is that whenever it's measured or tested, I'd like to know the evidence.
Critics. First, anything that you did during your earlier days in business that, looking back, you would have done differently?
Probably what my mother said. Take a day. I wasn't as good at taking a day early in my career as I am now, where you take a day and you think. And although people may have strong opinions, they may have thoughts, I think now I'm really more understanding that they should have those. Your job isn't to say they're wrong. Your job is to add information so that they, in their own course, can evolve and maybe see things more in a lane that you do. And if they don't, you're respectful of the fact that they're in a position to have an opinion.
How about the criticism of you that you think is fair?
Well, remember that the news we bring about what the view of the future is not something that they are charged with, because they only want to repeat the present or past. That's their job. Their job is to retain what's going on currently and not alter it.
They being who?
Management, owners, team, that's what their job is. Criticisms are always that we're doing things that hurt the game. We're doing things that are completely out of the norms. We're greedy. Because they always want to associate this with your money personally, or what you're always after, or you're the person that's always trying to do things that are really the antithesis of the norm.
You've been called a compulsive liar before. There was White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf once said you wanted to get the last bottom dollar, even if that meant hurting the relationship between the player and the club, and that, quote, I believe Boras doesn't care about relationships.
I don't ever believe I've received a call from Jerry in my years, ever. Because every call that was made was from me to him, and there are few, granted, because he was a person that, had his agenda for his treatment of labor and owners back in the late 80s and early 90s. But when people say that, I always go to the evidence, because a lot of owners today call me all the time to talk about their teams, and they reach out and they always get a response. I'm very diligent about talking about the betterment of every franchise in every way possible, because I want the game to be better. Communication to me is very, very important. But what I will say is that I don't think you hear a lot of that from a lot of other people who own teams. And again, my availability is, when I get a phone call from an owner, I'll always return it.
If anybody who's made the allegation that moral compass is off, you don't have sustained success as long as you've had, or have employee retention for as long as you've had, if anything's out of whack there.
I had a gentleman who's now passed, so I can speak openly, but I remember I was doing a contract for Kevin Brown, and Kevin went
Which was massive.
Yeah, it was the first $100 million contract, and Kevin was just a unique, skilled player. The Padres had the same team, same starting lineup, same pitching staff. They traded for Kevin Brown, and very few alterations in the lineup, and they went and won the National League pennant. And it really changed the infrastructure. And a gentleman by the name of Larry Lucchino, who was excellent at dealing with the politicos of a city and aided the franchise in getting their stadium built and all that. You know, they had put him in charge of negotiating Kevin Brown's contract. And he offered me like $44 million. And I said, you know, you work for a guy that bought and sold a company, bought and sold another one, bought and sold. I go, he didn't stop. I said, why is that any different for a player with his skills? I don't understand why you would think that way. He goes, it's completely different. And I go, Larry, you're going to get caught in this market because the market's completely different. I'm just giving you notice. So we went through the negotiation, and I had 3 or 4 teams that were whatever, and the Dodgers had been sold, and I was negotiating with Peter Chernin, who's a really, really smart executive, and he really...
Used to run Fox.
Yes, yeah. And the problem we had with Kevin was that he was from Georgia, and he had young children, and he wanted to be home with his kids. And he goes, we can solve that problem. I said, are you thinking about a private jet that would bring him? He goes, of course. We do that all the time in the entertainment industry. He goes, this is entertainment. And the Dodgers were now part of the negotiation. And then I had 2 or 3 other teams. And so in the end of the negotiation, Larry had called me because he had gotten rumors that Kevin was going to sign. All right, I'm going to offer you $66 million. And I said, just to let you know, this thing is about done, and as you'll find out, you're not in the market. And he goes, be very cautious. When you bluff, and you bluff with me, you're going to get burned. And I said, I'm going to be dealing with you for years. Why would I ever tell you things that I'm not going to stand behind? So he signs for 105, and Larry's statement was, no one else in the game would ever do this. The general manager there was just lost, hoodwinked, whatever. He made him believe that there were all kinds of offers for Kevin Brown, and none of those offers existed. And they bought it. But I always remember this came out, and there was a gentleman in Colorado named Jerry McMorris, who was a delightful guy. He came out and said, we offered $105 million too. And then I always tell this story to people about negotiations so that you understand that I don't have to tell you what the market is. I don't have to have other resources to prove to you what the market is. I can only tell you that my credibility is that whenever it's measured or tested, I'd like to know the evidence, because I have supporting facts that illustrate that exactly what we're saying was turned out to be the market. And whether or not you find it to be that you're the only one, the fact of the matter is that you're in the room and you have a chance to sign the player is the most important thing.